All right, welcome back. It's been almost a week after President Muhammadu Buhari and the Central Bank of Nigeria are yet to respond to the Supreme Court ruling making the old Naira note legal tender until December 31st, 2023. The Apex Bank gave the ruling on Friday, March 3rd, nullifying the federal government's decision to stop the old Naira and 1,000 Naira notes being legal tender, which took effect on February 10th. Nearly a month after a majority of the old notes were mopped out of circulation, the challenge of cash squeeze persists as new notes have remained elusive. What's the implication of this silence? We have in the studio a strategist, policy analyst, and the group CEO of global investment and trade company GITC, Malam Baba Yusuf, to share his thoughts with us this morning. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning once again.
Thank you, Sunday. Thank you, Brian, for having me.
We have complained to a level where everybody had run out of ideas. Not sure what to complain about. We just basically are taking one day at a time until whenever we seem to, whenever it will please our captors to set us free, as the case may be. And as we have seen from our introductions, it's been nearly 1 week. The Supreme Court have spoken, but somehow the institutions that are supposed to draw life from the statement of the Supreme Court and appropriate it in its policy directives are yet to do so. The President has not spoken, the Attorney General has not directed, and the CBN has not acted in line with the Supreme Court's pronouncement. What do you think is happening in the Nigerian state as we speak?
Thank you very much. What is happening is what I will say. What is happening? The country has become highly transactional in governance instead of being strategic, highly impulsive, and more worrisome now is the complete dislocation of what should have been a highly locked-stepped, if you like, governance framework within the executive itself and, of course, across the arms of government, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. And more importantly, the almost complete disregard for rule of law, which is becoming more pronounced as we ironically evolve evolve in our political history or political journey. Is more importantly worrisome because the judiciary is supposed to be a check, and supposed to be a guide as well. But unfortunately, that's not happening. And where we have gotten to today is more worrisome because if there is no regard for rule of law, then anarchy is looming. Government selects the judgment of courts to apply, and it is beginning to permeate also to citizens or corporates, if you like, in the private sector and the generality of the public, which is highly eroding the position or the stance or the relevance of judiciary in our society. I don't want to say we are getting to a point of being in a jungle, but we have a semblance of that. It's a virtual jungle if there is no rule of law. Of course, the judiciary is also has some portion of blame with regards to where we are today. The acts of, with due respect, the lordships of the court, of the courts, yes, and all the critical stakeholders within the judiciary, including the lawyers, some of them, have led us to where we are today, I believe. Of course, one may also, say that they are part of a larger society, so they are also, reacting or a reaction of what the total package called Nigeria is.
Well, talking about the total package called Nigeria, we had the at the precipice, or is it at the brink of ushering in a new government? And well, even at that, the governorship election was just recently postponed. It hit some of us, it took some of us by surprise. I mean, like, I just got to learn of it this morning myself. Before we move on to talking about the CBN and the rule of law and whatnot, what's your take on the postponement of the governorship election? Do you think it will have anything to do? Do you think it might have any effect on the perception of the seeming credibility or not of the process itself?
To be honest with you, Ibrahim, I expected this.
Okay.
When as a keen observer of what is happening, or a key player, because I'm a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I'm very interested in the political process and all the happenings that were unraveling and the outcome of the presidential and National Assembly elections and the actions, that culminated. Some of us could see clearly that there is potential of extending the date or scheduling of the governorship elections. Very simple. Obviously, there were project management issues, there were other issues, depending on where you sit, but totally we know the process had issues. And because of that, the critical players decided to take actions. For example, the presidential candidates of the Labour Party, Excellency Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Wazirin Adama Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of NNPP, Rabi Musa Konkoso, doctor, senator, and also, of course, the president-elect, if you like, Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu. All have taken actions or are reacting to actions taken by other players, which led to the court pronouncement. And for that pronouncement to be actioned by INEC, it is natural that the election will have to be postponed. If critical players or litigants in this case, that are the candidates, sought for within their rights and within the provision of the Electoral Act to inspect election materials, including the BIVAs, which are the same instruments that will be used for the governorship election. It presupposes that those equipments must be left the way they are until the inspections have taken place. Otherwise, what will happen is what I can call contamination of evidence, right? And to that extent, it is only natural that the elections be postponed. Today is Thursday. The ruling came yesterday. Next tomorrow is supposed to be election. We have over 170,000 polling units, which is equivalent to the number of BIVAS machines that would be inspected, that are supposed to be deployed. There's even a logistic angle, there's a technology angle of it, there's a logistic angle of it, right? One is they have to back up the data, and they have to reset these machines, right? There's timeline to do that. There are what you will call the protocols, the technology protocols to deal with that. And then there's the logistic aspect of it, getting these machines, moving them, preparing them, man and material, and all other factors. So it is all, for me, I'm not surprised. I was smiling, expecting this will happen. But the beauty of it is, rather than rush and have an election that will further exacerbate the hue and cry and the emotional, psychological impact of the elections that have taken place, regardless of where you stand, whether you are with the party that has won or lost, everybody has something to say about the process. We saw also the president-elect taking a strategic reactive position to say he also wants to inspect the material, which is very okay. So to that extent, let us be more sure-footed, with regards to the governorship election, so that when it happens, it will be a better process than what has happened. So I think it's okay.
Interesting perspective there from you. Still going back to the issue. We have seen, in the face of this seeming silence from the presidency and the office of the Attorney General, some semblance of movement or motion in the polity. We have seen banks take it upon themselves to start dispensing the old Naira notes in their votes. At the risks of being called out, we've seen GT, Zenith Bank, a couple of others, Wema Bank and the likes, dispensing the old Naira notes in their votes, not the ones they had remitted to the CBN. And in a bid to understand what is happening, we had made efforts to reach the central bank. They are neither denying what is happening nor accepting it. They have not issued a statement to say you can go ahead and issue. They had neither come down heavily on the banks that have decided to issue without their express instruction. What does this signpost? Is it that the banks are getting legal opinions from their own management to say we cannot be seen to corroborate what appears to be an illegality, or there had been some kind of unwritten circular to say you can go ahead but you would not get an instruction from, or there is a complete loss of confidence in the CBN to provide direction, as it were, to this monetary agent? What exactly do you think is happening?
I think it's a combination of all you have said and a reflection of the sad reality of our country today with regards to the governance framework. The banks you have mentioned, for those that are doing that, I think are being very tactical in trying to manage the situation. Of course, they are all Nigerians, and because they are front end, why do I say front end? They are the banks that see the people every day, lined up in the banks, queuing day and night, you know, trying to withdraw not such huge amount of money to survive, and they are not getting it. So the feedback, maybe the hierarchy of the bank is also getting, of course, what they are seeing even in the media is reflective of things that are so bad. I mean, as we speak today, you know, even the value of money has reduced by almost 50% just by this, you know, ill-timed policy. If you have to withdraw 10,000 Naira at the POS, for example, at the cost of, let's say, 2,000, some cases 3,000 Naira. So what you get in the case of a 3,000 Naira for 10,000 is your 10,000 has automatically become 7,000 Naira. You have lost 30% of the 10,000 Naira that is already suffering the vagaries of inflation over a period of almost 7 months already. And by the time you take that 7,000 Naira, right, to go and do transactions you are supposed to do by transfer or easily, because of the way things are, you have to travel farther to expense that cash or to spend that cash, which is a cost on the money. By and large, when you go to the market, because of the cost of money for the sellers, for the traders as well, the prices have hiked up. You know, and you can see the queues at the filling station, and you have to go to get to do the transfers. And all this, from my standpoint of view, in my opinion, reduces the value of the currency by almost 50% if you take the total value chain impact on Naira, just by this policy, apart from other economic parameters. So the human beings that are operating in the banks are also victims of the situation. Possibly that is the reason why some of them will say, you know what, let us take this position. And in reality, you know, according to the law, the highest court of the land has given a ruling on this. We don't expect the CBN to sanction us, if at all. And even if they will, anyway, there's what I call the time factor here. God is God, that he created time. 4 things God created that keeps us at bay: time, health, age, and what other, I'll remember the other one and tell you. What am I saying? We are coming to the tail end of this administration. That is the time factor. And the CBN governor's tenure is also coming to an end. So for so long he can push this as long as you want. Because, by the way, you know, including what you have said, yesterday the CBN came with a press release that they did not give instruction for the old notes to be. So in flagrant, disregard to the Supreme Court judgment. They are reiterating their position, that they have taken inter alia. So I think water is trying to find its way, if I borrow that phrase, and that is what is happening. It's a reaction to a very, very critical, choking, nerve-wracking reality of Nigeria, and that is why you see some of the banks trying to be creative that way, even though it's almost too late, unless the president of this country takes a position that will help ease this situation. Things will continue to get worse. And interestingly, like I always say, the incoming president will face political, economic, and social headwinds, partly due to this, very, very ill-timed and ill-placed policy.
All right. Well, your response now has actually done a lot to negate the question I was going to going to put across. But you did make mention of it, and I believe anybody who listens to your response now knows where you're leaning towards. But I'd like us to face it head on. Looking at the policy itself, in generality, the Kool-Aid that we were sold when this policy was being dished out was it was going to reduce inflation somehow, that it was going to reduce incidents of banditry and kidnap for ransom, and it was going to, a lot of things were actually said. It was going to mitigate vote buying and all that. Looking at all these things that we were sold on, and looking at how the policy is right now, how effective would you say it has been?
If I want me to rate it on a scale of 1 to 100, 0, and I'll give you my reasons. But before I get that, the last factor I wanted to talk about that God has placed that tame all of us is death. So it's death, time, age, and health. So coming back to this, 0 because I have mentioned earlier the impact of this policy on the populace, on the Naira, on the populace. Okay? So with regards to one of the first critical function of government is to protect the life and livelihood of its citizens, the welfare of the citizenry. That has been seriously impacted. If you ask yourself, or if I ask how life has been, how life is today compared to 3 months ago, it's worse. In all ramifications, people are dying in the hospital because they can't pay, not because they don't have the money. It is so bad, we have moved from a situation where people are dying because they don't have the money to pay for services. So there's another chunk of people that have joined this foray of people are dying because they are not able to even pay for the services due to the total failure of the system, due to this policy. With regards to banditry and insecurity, just yesterday in Niger State, the bandits attacked, they have kidnapped people, they have killed people, right? The National Security Advisor, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, spoke about the impact of this cashless policy on the armed forces, on the security forces. It is affecting their logistics. Logistics is a critical success factor to any security and armed force agency, right? Even their salaries. Don't forget they are also human beings. They are also Nigerians. They have families. Some are sick. Some have to go to school. They have to feed every day. So the chain effect, the domino effect, is all over. When you talk about election and one of the key dummies CBN has been selling is it will stop vote buying, and a lot of other political players bought into that dummy, surprisingly so. Yeah, maybe largely, but you see, all the political players are victims of this. But we all know that it did not stop vote buying in a way and manner that it would have reflected or affected significantly the outcome of this election, if you ask me. People that were doing projections, I don't want to mention names or parties, with regards to the key actor that was being tamed, or they were being tamed from getting into to win the election, won the elections anyway, right? So suffice it to say that, is that really a factor, right, at the end of the day? And it depends on where you are sitting, because everybody buys votes in Nigeria. The recent, the Nigerian Bar Association released an interim report with regards to the outcome or the process that culminated into, the emergence of the president-elect and the senators-elect and the members of House of Representatives-elect, and said there were vote buyings either by cash or transfer. To add to that report, we have seen in the media, and I can safely say I have seen, where people are also being induced. And I said it at the beginning of this policy that what the CBN has done, and with the approval of the president, is to actually force the principle of necessity is a mother of invention. And that at the end of the day, the political class will find ingenious ways of inducing the electorate, which is another way of commercializing the vote transactions, right? And what do? You see people voting. It got worse. Things are so bad that people take one packet of spaghetti to vote rather than 1,000 naira or 2,000 naira, right? Depending on what kind of spaghetti you are given. People were taking less than that. A can of pig milk. Things that before now, even with the vote buying, where the vote was even more valuable, so the vote has even become less valuable, as the case may be. And the reports are there from the election observers and all that really the vote buying still took place. One may argue that, yeah, but it has been reduced. If it has been reduced, when you compare the value or the result, have we achieved the objective vis-a-vis stopping vote buying, or have we made life more miserable for the average Nigerian? And you put it on a scale, what is better? Who is better off? The Nigerians should be better off. The citizens should be better off. Are we better off? No, we are worse off. There are a lot of issues raised with regards to the electoral process, depending on where you sit on the scale. So to that extent, it's not of zero impact. In fact, I changed my position. It's of negative impact. Zero is even better.
Taking up from those negative indices, there had been various school of thoughts around all of the things that are going on. There are those who have argued that since the CBN was not a party to what had happened, it would require the Attorney General's mandate. The Attorney General have been technical, and they are saying that they don't have any mandate to instruct or direct a monetary policy authority to take monetary policy action. But we'll come to that. Some other school of thought are worried because every society sort of have structures that helps to bail it at the moments of crisis. The governors have attempted, the president has not listened to them. The Supreme Court has taken a position, the president don't seem to care. He would rather go to Doha and return quietly to his Daura. Which other line of defense do we have? I say this in respect of the fact that we don't seem to see anything coming from the NLC. It's like once it is not about salary increment for its members, they don't even understand what advocacy in its real sense should be. And all other pressure groups, the NBA are interested in giving us a postmortem of the presidential elections. We are not seeing them put their weight. They can actually call for the debarring of the Attorney General. I mean, it's within their statutes. If a member of his profession is now the architect of a complete disregard for the temple of justice, something can be done from his end. Why does it appear that every pressure group that we have always known seem to be quiet?
One word to use for that: politics. Almost every player, every critical stakeholder in the Nigerian project has become politically inclined. It is not something new, but it is so much so with negative impact. Look at the executive. The policy itself, with all sense of responsibility, conceptualization and actioning of this policy, as far as some of us are concerned, and I think we are in the majority, is politically inclined. Of course, even with the view to say you are going to stop vote buying and all that, but we only start to trigger this process 3 months to election, when you could have sat down to come out with a strategic framework to do this from 2019 to date, to ensure you have a cashless policy, to ensure you mop up liquidity, to ensure you gag and chain whatever political players you want to change from doing whatever they are doing. Unfortunately, very unfortunately so, members of the same team are divided and fighting, in the quest for power or to stop somebody from, getting into office. And to that extent, completely lose focus and come with a very, very terrible, evil objective, which has fallen on its face. In all this, I always say that I'm still looking at the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, because the buck stops on his table. First of all, as a father of the nation. Secondly, as the chief executive of this country. Whether CBN was part of the suit or not, there is a president that will call everybody to order. Whether the Attorney General is playing the ostrich or not, or is even a critical contributor to the issue. Sadly so, as a member of the Temple of Justice, as a senior advocate of Nigeria, as the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, and importantly as a Nigerian, as a citizen. And the part where he comes from in this country is one of the worst affected with regards to this issue. Is taking this position, leaves much to be desired. But of course, it's not their fault. We have a chief executive of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that even where you don't have these issues within the executive, he should come and provide that leadership. He should come and show that compassion, that empathy, and put things in order so that things will be better. Unfortunately, that is not happening. You talked about Labour Congress. Most of these guys or all these agencies or all this, they have become special, most largely over time have become special purpose vehicles for some vested interest or parochial interest pursuance. And that is what we see. And that is why these checks and balances are not happening in our polity. Now what you see is people either sitting on the fence for some whatever reasons, strategic or tactical, or because if, like you said, it does not impact me, but you know what, Sunday, it impacts you whether you like it or not. You will have an aunt or a brother somewhere that all of us are suffering this. Unfortunately, people are not taking position for whatever parochial reason. This is the sad situation of a failure of a leadership value chain in this country.
All right. Well, you talked about the actions or inactions of the president himself. We just read on the front pages of the newspapers some legal personalities offering their opinion that the president is leaving himself open for prosecution after he steps down because of the seeming disregard for the Supreme Court judgment. We shouldn't forget the fact that earlier, before this judgment was actually passed, the Supreme Court gave a ruling and said, okay, we're going to look at this, but before we pass judgment, the status quo should remain the same. The president came out and said something totally different. And nobody's saying anything about it. And now he's quiet and nobody's saying anything about it. So we just heard that he will leave himself open to prosecution if they decide to take that track after he leaves office. It's doubtful, but still, if that were to happen, will that be, how good will that be for the nation or otherwise?
First of all, I'm sorry to say it's not going to happen because of the kind of political system we run. I look forward to see one of the critical things the incoming president will do, dealing with the issue of restructuring, dealing with I hope and pray that part of the discussion will be looking at the entire political structure or the political system we run. So the way it is, even apart from this particular issue, to expand the conversation, there are provisions within our constitution that give some leeway to sort of manage or hold at bay to a certain extent some of our, top line leaders like the president, like the governors. Of course, they have immunity. But we also have provisos for impeachment. Don't forget that even members of the ruling party, some months ago, when push was coming to shove and heat was everywhere, were already muting the idea of impeachment, which has gone down the drain because it's almost impossible to impeach the president. In line with the provisions, when you look at the provisions and even the how it can play out, how is it possible to play out? When have you ever seen even a former governor being charged for contempt. Even in the recent part with the EFCC chair, the Inspector General of Police, they were charged for contempt, isn't it? What has happened? Talk less of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, whether sitting or former. You know, I don't see that happening, sadly, because this is Nigeria. And I think people do this because, of course, nothing will happen. That's my honest opinion on this. It's not going to happen. Even for the CBN governor, even for the Attorney General, not even the President, that flouts court orders will not face any consequences. Because in Nigeria, consequences with regards to disregard for rule of law is the least impactful, or even if it exists, there is no consequence for these things.
We have seen with, of course, the benefit of technology, how checks and balances operate in other climes. In Egypt, for instance, we saw the military and the rest of them being a separate arm of government, sort of, whether in terms of choosing its leaders or sort of exerting a subtle pressure on the political system where they fail to operate within the ordinances of their law. In the United States, we've seen some independence with the Office of the Attorney General, as separate from the Minister of Justice. We have seen the CIA take on investigations of sitting high-profile government functionaries. And even a system that sort of helps it to purge itself. In other words, where constitutional provisions are flaunted, they move in straight on the part of the Constitution. Why is it impossible for the police, for instance, or the DSS, or whatever the institutions would be, to begin to take actions against people who should naturally implement the positions of the Supreme Court? Like you said, some things are impossible. Are we ever going to get there? Would it require some kind of constitutional amendment to provide that kind of independence that would allow institutions like this to mandate authorities, executives within the judiciary, within the executives, to do the biddings of the Supreme Court?
Of course, Sunday, you have answered partly your question yourself. We are suffering a constitutional quagmire. The Constitution, everybody that wants Nigeria to progress agrees that there's a lot much left to be desired with regards to our Constitution. The majority of the citizens are not happy with the Constitution. And to that extent, a proper review, I use the word proper deliberately, a review of our Constitution is critical to the success of the Nigerian project. And that is why I'm talking about the restructuring, and I'm happy that all the presidential candidates, and indeed the president-elect, even for the president-elect, he has been talking about restructuring even before the campaign time, just like the presidential candidate even of the PDP, I think. So we expect to see some actions with regards to that, because it is actually going to help us moving forward. When there is a lacuna in the Constitution, of course agencies will not act. Even where they want to act, the other vested interests within the structure will harp on that so that they don't act. And indeed, you are aware, Sunday, Brian, even where the provisions of the constitutions are clear, people still breach. So there is need for us to overhaul our Constitution. There is need for restructuring. There is need for a total review of how Nigeria is as a project, as a country, for us to actually be more sure-footed, be more directional, be more result-oriented, be more positively impactful to the generality of Nigeria and Nigerians. Until that is done, we will just be doing what I call running on the treadmill. It shows and the indicator you have run 15 kilometers, but guess what? You are still standing in the same place. We need to make tangible progression for the betterment of our country. Until the right things are done, until we have the right structure, the right mechanism, the right system, that is not going to happen. And it comes back to what? Having the right leader in place at the right time. We hope the incoming president will do that. We look forward to that. I'm very confident that we'll have a better progress moving forward.
So from what you said, it seems like the president-elect will have a lot on his plate when he eventually takes over.
To be honest, I don't envy the incoming president. And sadly, you know, the administration is making it more difficult for the incoming president. Because if you look at all the indices, looking at the rear view mirror 4 or 5 years behind, and looking ahead, from World Bank to IMF to even the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics and all, things were not looking good even before now, and things are looking worse. So Nigeria as it is, with the diversity, with the issues of polarization, our inherent issues, you know, it has a plate full of issues to deal with. I believe that by the grace of God, God will give him the capacity and the enablement to do it, because it's one thing to be the president with all you have, but we should pray for our president, incoming president, and indeed for all our leaders, for wisdom, for understanding, for enablement, and for all of us Nigerians to understand that we have various roles to play for the president to achieve. The president is not omnipotent, he's not a superpower. Indeed, we need to play our various roles.
Before I let you go, the president has showed up in several international forums, and wherever he has had the opportunity, he sort of gives himself the thumbs up. He says he has met all his pre-election promises. He's certain he has done very well against whatever indices that are churned out by even the federal government agencies. He sort of gives himself an above average pass mark. And one wonders, when you listen to people like you talk about indices, you know, one wonders whether the president is availed the same indices as the one that we consume publicly, or there are some parameters he used to evaluate what he has done that is different from what we understand, or that the people around him, as we always pretend to say, don't seem to be telling the president the truth. What impression does he make on you every time you see him come out in a public forum like the one he had in Doha, where he seemed to suggest to people against the run of play that he has done very well and he has met all of his political campaign promises?
You know, Sunday, this is the normal political posturing of leaders. Self-appraisals are always mostly on the positive, even for all of us human beings, talk less of a sitting president and outgoing one for that matter. Because one may argue that in a normal situation, if actually the appraisal he is reeling out is not true, maybe he shouldn't have been the president. Maybe in another climb he would have resigned. Maybe he would have been impeached. But indices aside, because we also hear, not just in the context of Nigeria, in fairness of Nigeria or in fairness of President Buhari, even in the United States of America, when indices are churned out, most times the establishment disregards it. Ironically, now, in case even the indices that are churned out by government agencies are discountenanced by the establishment. That being said, what is critical for us, for me as a Nigerian and for Nigerians and for even the international fora, is not just the indices. It's the reality on ground, which actually the indices are supposed to reflect. And what we see on the streets, what we see in Nigeria, is what is telling us what we are going through. So the president is at liberty to self-appraise and to say he has done all that he's saying he has done. But what is reality cannot be changed or erased by anybody. And that is what will remain indelible in the annals of history. And that is what will remain the variables or the factors that everybody will account for before Almighty God.
Interesting. Strategist, policy analyst, group CEO of Global Investment and Trade Company, GITC, Malam Baba Yusuf, has been in the studio with us in the last half hour, digesting, helping us to understand, helping us to make sense of what our realities are, of what the projections have been, and of how the establishment has behaved in the last couple of months with regards to one singular issue that has had a colossal effect on just about everything that we do, our currency and its availability for every Nigerian. I want to thank you very much for making time to be here, and it's a pleasure to be with you always. It's a masterclass not just for Nigerians at home, but for even those of us in the studio. And we look forward to when you will show up again to share this insightful perspective with us.
Thank you very much, Sunday, Ibrahim. Always a pleasure to come here. Thank you for the opportunity, most obliged, and thank you very much, Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Nigerians, for allowing us free access into your living room today. I hope we have brought you education, we have brought you information, we have brought you entertainment. And remember that we are all going through this together, and we would emerge on the other side victorious together. Nigeria is what is important to all of us, and this country is ours to plow and not to plunder. I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Let's do this again tomorrow.
All right, Nigeria is what we have, and definitely each and every one of us has a role to play to make Nigeria what we want it to be. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.